Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello and welcome to the Truth and Liberty livecast. My name is Mark Cowart, sitting in for Andrew Womack tonight, and we have a very special guest tonight. Actually, from right here in our home territory, we have Sheriff Jason Mikesell with us. Jason, so good to have you with us. And we're going to give you a more proper introduction here shortly, but it's so good to have you with us. You're sheriff right here in Teller County.
I am.
And Richard, it's always good to be with you. And as usual, we let you do the heavy lifting. So you've got some announcements and things to share with us. So let's do that, and we'll get on with our interview with Jason here.
Okay, sounds good. So good to have Sheriff Mikesell with us. And Mark, it's always good to be with you. Yeah, guys, if you're watching our show on our website, I want to encourage you to check out our resources page, or even if you're not, go to truthandliberty.net and check out our resources. We have got some amazing materials that we've recently loaded there. I want to encourage you to get that. Did you know you can, Truth and Liberty is a one-stop shop for your news? We've got a 24/7 news feed on our website from all of our favorite reliable conservative sources, and not to mention hundreds of articles under our resources page. One of the things I want to mention to you is the article on the harmful effects of pornography. Check that out, guys. It's chock full of kind of shocking information about what pornography has done to our culture, including crime and the breakup of families and other things. Also, we've got some amazing events coming up here at Andrew Womack Ministries and elsewhere. June 10th through the 11th, this isn't actually here, it's in Georgia. Andrew is going to be speaking at the Awakening 2022 in Fayetteville, Georgia, sponsored by our good friends at Million Voices. I believe that Mario Murillo is going to be there, and Lance Wallnow and others, and so that is a must-attend event if you live in that area. It's going to be powerful and awesome. I saw that Mario was just in Tulsa last week, and it packed out. I think he might have been at the Mabee Center. It was a huge facility. People out in the streets waiting to get in. It was massive. But also July 3rd through the 4th, the In God We Trust performance. Mark your calendars now to come out for that and for the Summer Family Bible Conference that's right after it. It's a great time for the whole family. You will be so glad you came. It'll remind you why you're thankful to be in America, and I promise you that. It's an awesome musical performance, and then the conference, you'll just get recharged, refilled, and connects with some amazing people. Are you a subscriber to Truth and Liberty? If you're not, you need to be. I'm telling you, every week we send out information that is helpful to you as you stand for truth in the public square and for Christ. And I'm telling you, you can't get it anywhere else. So subscribe today, Truth and Liberty. Just go on our website, upper right-hand corner, click subscribe, and give us your email address, and we'll start sending that information to you. As well, we will send you a free copy of Andrew's book, or we'll put your name in a hopper and draw out, and you'll be eligible to receive a free copy of Andrew's latest book, More Grace, More Favor. This book is about the amazing virtue of humility. Now, humility is one of those things you don't hear a whole lot about because people don't want to hear it, right? But it's actually one of the keys of the kingdom, and it will unlock God's favor in your life and true peace in your life. So subscribe today and be eligible to receive that. Also, this is an interactive live cast. We're going to be talking about some important stuff today, and if you want to give a question to Sheriff Mikesell or Pastor Mark, or maybe post a comment, you can do that in the comment section on Facebook or the chat section on our website, and we'll try to get to that. And then also, there's some amazing stuff happening here at Truth and Liberty. I can't even talk about all of it, but we are making a big difference, you guys. And if you want to be a part of that with us, you can partner with us by becoming a member. Just go on the donate page today, sign up to give an automatic recurring gift of just $5 or more per month, and you'll be a Truth and Liberty member, and we'll send you in the mail a free copy of Alex McFarland's book, The Assault on America, How to Defend Our Nation Before It's Too Late. We're about to run out of these, so if you want one, become a member today, and you'll be a partner with us in what we're doing here. Last thing I wanted to mention, if you need someone to agree with you tonight in prayer, whatever you're going through, Andrew has a whole room, a huge phone room full of trained prayer ministers 24/7 who are waiting for your call. So call in today at 719-635-1111, and they'll give you some encouragement and pray with you and agree for God's intervention in your life. That's all I've got, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Man, a lot of great things going on, a lot of great information available.
Amen.
And we are so blessed tonight to have Sheriff Jason Mikesell with us.
Thank you.
And I just have to tell you, Jason, I have the deepest respect for you, for law enforcement. I think we've all seen, Richard, in the last several years, there's no other way to describe it but a spirit of lawlessness.
Yes.
That's been unleashed. And I noticed in your bio here, your grandfather was chief of police, your father was a Vietnam veteran, and it says here that you felt from a very young age you would be involved in serving others and protecting others. Tell us about yourself, a little of your background, and what you're currently doing.
Yep, sure. My grandfather he was chief of police of Abilene, Kansas in its heyday. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. From a young age, that's all I wanted to do was law enforcement. I knew early that that's what I wanted to do. I found it exciting and rewarding. I spent 20 years with the sheriff's office, and then I retired as a commander of operations and of the SWAT team. Wow. So I did that for many, many years. I retired. I came back about 2 years later after a phone call about returning. I flew from overseas to get here to attempt to take that job, and I did. About 28 hours later, after 26 hours of flights, I became a sheriff. And I went through my first election. I didn't have anybody that ran against me, and then we took up the struggle, and that's where we're at today.
That's amazing. You know, one of the reasons we were talking about before we came on air, law enforcement, people such as yourself, are really, according to the Word of God, are servants of God, because you stand between us and evildoers. And there's a commission from the Word of God that you are raised up to punish evildoers. And you know, I think you've seen countries or situations where lawlessness abounds and law enforcement has fallen. Can you tell us anything that would give us a little insight? Because when we look at what's going on, it doesn't make sense to the natural mind. Why is there this hatred toward police officers and law enforcement and putting everybody into one bundle, so to speak? What have you seen in some of your travels and experience?
You know, when you deal with any law enforcement outside the United States, one thing they do is they look up towards law enforcement in the United States. Here in the United States, we have such a great ability to have that separation between government, federal government, and local law enforcement, to where local law enforcement are constituents of the people. They really are. They take an oath to protect the people. We have a lot of integrity values that are seen throughout the world. Bribery, those types of things aren't allowed here. In a lot of countries, they are. And if you look at a lot of countries that have fallen and went back to chaos, Egypt's one. There's been multiple others. But a lot of it is assault on their law enforcement infrastructure. And then once that goes away, it has to now be the government coming in to take over. And they're not as trained as well. There's not an understanding of what's needed. So it destroys that basis of what the people believe, and that we work for them. We're part of them. We're the ones that keep that candle lit at night.
You know, it's always been amazing to me that you guys put on your badge and you go out to work, and someone may be, you know, having someone trying to break in their home. They make a phone call. You don't know those people, but you go literally put your life on the line, stand between them and danger. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of hypocrisy in this country among the people that are so vocal about how they hate law enforcement. You can't trust them. Remember, there was a coffee shop in some state, and one of them wrote this horrible word on one of the police officers' coffee cup. And somebody dug in and found they had called the police 5 times that week to come to their coffee shop because of some person causing trouble and threatening people. And so how do you deal with that? You know, it's not something that gets rewarded a lot. And how do you deal with that kind of thing?
Well, and you got to think, there's 98% of people love law enforcement. There's a very small percentage that are causing this. Look at Seattle. There, you have the community saying, we want law enforcement back. Now they're trying to overspend to get law enforcement, but they've lost so many they can't create it fast enough. Those same people that were on the cusp of saying, hey, let's defund law enforcement, guess what they're spending money on? They're spending money on their own security force. Why is that? You look at them, and it makes me laugh to some degree and go, you're getting what you asked for. But on the other side, it makes me sad to watch that many good people in this country have to deal with what a very small group of people decided they wanted, and we gave it to them. And the unfortunate piece is that law enforcement doesn't get to control the narrative, right? So you have attorneys that from the ACLU, you have all these organizations that are trying to control that narrative, and they're telling people how they have to think. Where instead of law enforcement being able to say, that's not what's happening, this is what's occurring. And that's the difference on why you're seeing the narrative being pushed so far to the left.
No, go ahead, Richard.
Well, you know, the riots that happened in 2020 and the Defund Police movement, I remember at the time thinking, defund police? What kind of insanity is that? What do you think is going to happen? We're going to become safer? And sure enough, what's happening to the crime rate now in America, all across America, and even right here in our backyard in Teller County?
Well, the crime is exponential. You've got a 46% increase in crime across Colorado that's increasing. And it's interesting to me. I start looking back at these numbers starting 2019, and you see 86% increase in car thefts. You're seeing all these exponential numbers where the increases are so much in 2019. The ACLU actually, they put online this document, and it's called Reducing, or it's COVID-19 Jail Depopulation in Colorado. It's a manual that they produced.
This is the ACLU.
It's the ACLU's manual.
Yeah.
And what
Tough on crime people.
Tough on crime. And what they're talking about is how proud they are that they were able to decrease the population in prison by 46%. And in that same year, we rise 47% in crime. 86%, 40%, 46% in homicides in Colorado.
What was that percent?
46%.
In homicides?
Just in homicides and murders in Colorado. So you look at all that and you go, well, that 46%, you depopulated these jails, and the attempt to say, oh, that's not the reason why, that recidivism rate is not the reason why. But if you look at the numbers, that's pretty similar in what they released to what our crime spiked in a year.
Wow.
So tell us more about that releasing people from jail. How did this happen? And is that tied into the woke agenda and the defund police and all this left-wing stuff that's going on in America today?
It is. It's a total left movement of what they want is total control over that narrative again, saying, hey, if we release all these people, we're going to rehabilitate them. We're going to make it better. But what they've done is show me the rehabilitation that actually shows that people are so much more productive. When I have increases in numbers up to 87% for car thefts, is that really helpful numbers? And I would imagine a guess to this that says, I bet you if we really did the research on it, would show that 25% of those continue to steal cars. 80%, 86% is a lot. That's a big number. That's 86% more victims just on your car stolen. And then we decrease law enforcement's ability to deal with it. That's a big issue. And by saying that, what I mean is this: they've decriminalized a lot of these things. They want us to serve summonses, not arrest. You know, they don't want that interaction with law enforcement. Well, who's going to tell them no? Is a person that just bought this new car that has to pay for it because your insurance won't cover it, are they going to stop them? I've heard stories from people that said, hey, we can track our cars now. We followed it back to where the person has stolen our car to, and we've called the police in bigger cities, and they come and they say, there's nothing we can do.
Jason, when I hear all this right here, the majority of people, they don't want this. And the majority love and appreciate law enforcement. And when we hear that stuff, what can we do practically as citizens to help support law enforcement and to change that?
You got to vote. Here's the big thing, right? We have got to put the right people in office. Right now in Colorado, your legislature is Democratic run. And here's, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, it doesn't matter if you're Republican. Crime is crime. And logic somehow has to get through to going, why are we allowing these laws to continue? If I reduce drugs down from what we used to have is anything over 4 grams, you became a felon, right? Well, now if you get right around 4 grams or so, it's reduced. 4 grams of any type of methamphetamines is a lot. 4 grams of, so if I'm releasing these people because I'm not allowed to protect the public from them, it creates this feeling for those criminals that they can just do whatever. Last year I had an incident where we had a gentleman that shot at my deputies. It's a stolen car, they're in pursuit with it, he's firing at all kinds of officers. We find out that he was recently released on parole, that he had had several charges against him, but nobody did anything to him. So it's putting my officers' lives in jeopardy. It's putting the citizens in jeopardy. And the only way to do that for the public that want to stop this is they have to take that first step and start talking about it. They have to get the narrative back. And how do they do that? They have to talk to the news. They have to form coalitions that say we've had enough. They've got to start voting right. And we need those things to start occurring because children in school, you know, at the current rate in Colorado, we've increased to the 4th highest crime in the United States. That's crazy to me.
That's Colorado.
Just Colorado.
Wow.
Because before that, we were way lower. We were a very safe state. And since just prior to COVID, we have increased where our crimes, and that means our youth are going to be a victim. And who's going to protect those victims? You know?
Isn't it something?
Isn't it something?
You know, it matters who you put in office. Colorado's got a trifecta right now where the Democrats control the governor, the legislature, and every single statewide elected executive office. What are some of the policies that they have pushed through and enacted that have resulted in all this crime?
Well, they've attempted to take away the immunity of law enforcement. Why is that important?
Now, what does that mean, immunity of law enforcement?
That immunity is if I arrest you and you believe it's wrong, then you have the right to sue me. Well, it used to be you had governmental immunity to where the government would take that on. Now what it means is that if I as a county or a city decide not to cover you, that now immunity no longer exists. You will take the full brunt of that liability, which you have to pay for that. So think about a young officer who's making right around $40-some thousand a year, now facing a $2 million lawsuit, and a city or a county can walk in and say, you know what, we're not going to protect you on this. You know, and then you have a state and a government saying, we no longer have federal immunity to help you with this, or state immunity. And here's the problem with that, right? Law enforcement's across the states looking at this going, you are not going to protect me anymore. How do I protect you if I can't be protected? And there's a lot of fear in that. So you have officers saying, I don't want to be a police officer anymore. I'll go sell cars. I don't want them to take everything I own from me if something happens, because it's all perception based.
Has that affected your, you mind if I?
No.
Your recruiting ability?
Oh, it's killing our recruiting. And here's the thing, my office, we haven't had a application for a full post police officer in months. This has happened around the state. Now, police officers are being paid a lot more for dealing with what they're dealing with. And so your smaller counties and cities aren't able to try to get those folks working for them. At the same time, the state, because of COVID, isn't allowing as many students in the classrooms anymore. So our recruitment levels that are coming from an academy are reduced across the state. So we can't have as many students in the academy. So this exponential rate of people retiring and getting out of law enforcement is compounded by the fact that we can't get any new into law enforcement.
Wow. You know, I'm learning things tonight I just was not aware of, Jason. And this has got me concerned deeply. I know that for instance, we've been involved with school boards and seeing things like that. Well, parents are waking up, and one of the things that backfired, I think, on the left and the people that are out to destroy America during Corona was they started finding out what was our children were being taught. All these children, the parents are going like, what's going on? So there's this surge, but I don't know that that's taken in the area of law enforcement. And I've just got this deep concern on the inside with the way you're describing this. Who in their right mind, getting paid $40,000 a year, would want to put himself at risk for everyone when they could just pull the the cover back and say you're on your own if somebody, and who wouldn't try to sue police officer, a criminal, for goodness sakes, or somebody that felt they were being done wrong? Are you seeing any movement here or across the country of the people rising up and speaking out, or groups being formed?
You're starting to see local organizations. There's one out of the Springs that I can't remember the name of it, but they're starting to talk about this crime. You're starting to see it on the news, right? Your mainstream news media talking about the amount of crime. Now you have some Democrats who are trying to jump out from front of it and saying, oh no, we're friends of law enforcement. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not friends of law enforcement. They're the ones that put us in this position from these ideals that we just want to let everybody go and it'll all be fine. There's some times in life where you have to be hard to change somebody's actions and reactions. And the fact is that law enforcement was that. And not everything can be nice all the time, especially if somebody's trying to kill you. It's just not a happy day.
No.
So somebody's going to get hurt. And I will tell you, I don't want my officers to get hurt. I want them to use the force that's necessary to deal with something. And the fact is, every day, more and more law enforcement are scared to use that force because they're worried about the lawsuits. They're worried about being in trouble. They're worried about these issues coming up. And it's sad to me to watch because we're seeing good young men and women that are falling victim to this across law enforcement. And it's harsh. It's just a harsh world and reality that we live in.
One of the things you were saying before we went on the air was about that they have caused parole boards and parole officers and stuff like that to sort of, I would put it this way, stand down a little bit and not enter parole violations and probation violations. Can you tell us more about that? In fact, I think you gave us a stunning example.
I have a stunning example. And here's the thing about this one. I won't use his name, but there's a criminal in Denver. He gets arrested for multiple offenses, felony type offenses for harming other people and doing things that are illegal. He goes to court, a judge gives him a year probation on something he used to, what we had was a 3 strikes and you're out rule. If you had 3 misdemeanors, you ended up with a felony out of it. If you had 3 felonies, you went to jail and you didn't come out of jail for a while. What this judge did is he convicts him. He gives him a year probation. Within that year, he violates his probation 28 times by not having a sample of his urine taken, which means what they do is they tell him, hey, you need to come on such and such a day. We need to get a sample to make sure you're not on drugs and you're doing the right thing. Doesn't show up for 28 times over 9 months. During that 9 months, he gets arrested again, one of them for a weapons violation, prohibited use of a weapon, which means he's carrying a firearm. He ends up with a second charge. When he goes to court, he actually pleads guilty to one of those. He's then released. They still don't violate him on his probation. How do you not be violated on a probation for committing a felony act? And this is in Denver. He then goes on to kill somebody during the time when he should have been back in jail. And what I don't understand is he's in a pursuit with police. He ends up killing somebody. He possibly robs another bank. And this guy was able to walk free for a year. What example are we setting to a community? What example are we setting for our children when these types of people are causing these issues? And here's the problem I have. The state of Colorado says, hey, our recidivism is down. Recidivism is identified by somebody violating their probation or parole and being placed back into custody and incarcerated. Well, this guy should have been, recidivism rate should have showed 28, 29 times, 30 times. But yet, if we don't identify him as a recidivism rate, well, I guess we've done a good job because we've rehabilitated him and put him back out in the public to be a good person that's going to work with all other folks.
Wow.
So it didn't happen.
It's like an accountant cooking the books there. Something is not coming up. You know what I'm hearing is in Ecclesiastes, it says, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, it says, therefore, the hearts of the sons of men are fully set to do evil. And that's what's going on right here. If they tie the hands. This has got me wanting to know more about these groups that are rising up, to find out what they're doing and how to help people get involved, because a lot of people don't pay attention to this if their life is relatively calm. But we've got to remember, when you said that about the homicide rate being up, 46%?
I believe it's 46% in Colorado. It's very high.
There is a number of people whose lives are permanently altered, And there's got to be an awakening in this area, like there is now with the school boards. I never would have realized the school boards is one of the most volatile spiritual battlegrounds I've ever seen, and things we can barely wrap our minds around what they're trying to teach our kids. And here they can't read, write, or do math, and they want to teach them about sexuality at these very young ages and put all these agendas in them and all that kind of stuff. So right here in Teller County, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a sheriff here?
Well, I'll tell you, one of them is coming on air and actually talking about this. I have found through my history as a sheriff is when you take that step forward and you say, hey, this is a problem, I'll probably end up on some different news feeds tomorrow talking about it, and I'll be biased in different things. That's a pretty normal thing for law enforcement now. There's an attack from the media that just does not stop. And anything you do or say, it's going to be held against you as a law enforcement officer. It's ugly. So just for people to stand up and start talking about it, I think is a big first goal to really get that information out there. Because how many people are talking about this? You have the District Attorney's Council that's pushing back on the state for a lot of legislative issues. You have the sheriff's associations, the police associations are joining forces to try to fight this. But it's combat on a normal daily basis. And you have a state that's taking legislative acts and they're pushing them through so quickly that nobody can get ahead of it to get up there to talk about it. And even if we do talk about it, it's like they're muting you. They don't want anybody to hear those types of things.
You know, there's been some crazy bills that came through in the last few months, including the atrocious abortion bill signed by Governor Polis, which makes, and now California might have passed this already, but we were the most pro-abortion law in North America. Not like China, North Korea, and Cuba were ahead of us, but that's about it. Anyway, when people go up there to testify and to go in front of these committees, these Democrats could not care less what you have to say. They don't. It doesn't matter. It's just let's get through these witnesses and get on with what we want to do here. Have you found a similar environment up there when you've gone up to talk about issues of concern?
The Sheriff's Association and the lobbyists, it's all the same. And that's the thing. If you're trying to speak truth, you will be shut down. And that's what we have seen. And that's a big problem for this country.
You know, I think in a similar way, for instance, with the school boards, everything you're saying, my mind is flashing over that to where these parents are getting upset. They're showing up to the meetings. Literally, the school boards are pushing mute. And the parent, and so literally pushing mute, which is what I'm hearing. And so there's only one answer, and it's we the people. I read this document called, you know, it starts with we the people. But one of the things I've been doing, you know, our good friend Bill Federer, he's got a couple of books. He's been on Truth and Liberty multiple times, teaches for us here at Practical Government School. And I'm carrying in my briefcase right now his book, Miracles in American History. And it's these short stories that his wife, Susie, put together. You can read them in 5-10 minutes. And it's times in American history when if God had not come through, we'd be done. Are you seeing any signs of breakthrough in spite of all this opposition and pushback? Are you seeing some glimmers of hope anywhere?
I think, yeah, and here's why, right? No parent wants to have their children grow up in an America that's unsafe. I think you're going to start seeing more of a groundswell to talk about the law enforcement side of things. And here's why, right? We still have not reached the bottom of this barrel. We've not hit rock bottom yet. I think you're going to see a wave this year of crimes that are just increasingly bad. But at some point, this country will take itself back. It just can't continue this way. That or we go broke. We become a lawless country like so many others, and we're no longer the America that we saw growing up. And it's changed drastically, but I truly think people are starting to see what we're saying, that change has to take place. And we've got to get back to values that this country was made on.
You know, in the last couple of years, it's become very in fashion to badmouth police. And I think it goes hand in hand with the bad mouthing of America. You know, the 1619 Project and the assault on who we are as a nation, critical race theory, teaching that America is systemically racist, that police officers are systemically racist. You can't trust them because they're wearing a uniform, they hate you if you're a minority. Do you tie any of this back to that whole poisonous teaching and doctrine?
Oh, I do. And here's the thing, and I know from my agency, I won't ever kneel with anybody to sit down and make me talk about what their agenda is. I won't do it. We won't allow our flag to be torn down. You know, that's something that our veterans paid very dearly for. And I'm telling you that law enforcement, we cannot allow people to control our narrative. We don't kneel with folks to tell them, I'm so sorry. Yes, were there things that went on in law enforcement that I wish that had not happened? I do. But my agency didn't do it. All those people that I've served with shoulder to shoulder didn't do it. So why are we all judged the same? Everybody wants equality, but what about equality for those men and women that are doing the job? Last year, we lost one of the largest amounts of law enforcement officers I've ever seen in history. And the thing is that we can't lose several hundred law enforcement officers every year. It's not okay. And
are you talking locally or nationwide?
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
Nationwide. And that's, COVID had a big piece to it, but you also had a rise in shootings. You just have such a disrespect for the position, for the authority. But we're seeing that disrespect across the board. I mean, look, in a lot of big cities, you can't even walk downtown anymore. You have such a huge homeless population. You have all these issues. And it's always, there's an excuse on why we have these things. And quite honestly, if law enforcement would stand up again and go, we're not going to allow this anymore. But we have to separate city managers and city boards that are controlling police departments to step away. There needs to be a separation of those things. Law enforcement has to do its job without always believing that somebody's out to get them.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, I remember my dad saying, you always say yes, sir, no, sir, to a police officer. You see that car going by, police car, you respect those guys because they're here to protect us. I don't know that that message is really being out there today, you know, like it should be. What can we do as Christians and as parents to help in this situation? What can pastors do and moms and dads all over the place? What can we do to help?
Spread the message that we have a voice, and that voice now has to be heard. You know, the thing about good people is we very rarely step up to the point of stepping forward into the political arena because we go, nah, that's for politicians. Well, there's a belief that politicians aren't going to tell you the truth, and don't stand for that. You know, make them pay for that by taking back those positions.
I want to echo, you know, what Richard says, and something that's kind of a soapbox for me is for pastors. The founding of this country, it was the Black Robe Regiment, which was a backhanded comment by the British, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the pastors. They were bold, they spoke out, and Bill Federer was with us a few weeks back here on Truth and Liberty, and he was talking about silence is consent. And he used the illustration of when you go to a wedding. If there's anybody that objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. So when you were silent, you were consenting that this marriage, you're blessing it. And that goes not just for the pastors, but for the citizens. And boy, I'll tell you, just hearing you this amount of time, Jason, my heart and my antennas are tuned toward those people. I want to find out who that is in Colorado Springs that's rising up so we can hear what they're doing. And that is the hope that I have. You know, America's seen some times, first, we should have never been a nation if it had not been for God's hand. But we had all these times that if God hadn't intervened, we wouldn't have made it and survived. And I think we're at that place in America right now, and there's great things happening. But I want to remind too, Richard, the viewers, please write in your questions. I want to hear what some of you are thinking right now. So write in for Sheriff Mikesell, and let's see what they're going to be asking us tonight, Richard. So.
Yeah. Well, I've got one more question if we can squeeze it in before the viewers. It seems like in the headlines in the last few years also that there's been some stuff that looks a whole lot like law enforcement being politicized. In other words, law enforcement agencies, especially from the federal government, doing things out of political motivation to protect the power of certain people. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that just, am I imagining things, or is that going on some?
No, I think it does go on. I think in a lot of your cities, look at Seattle and different places like that, in your larger cities and your government organizations at the top. It takes a lot to get to those positions. They're political positions. They're political appointees a lot of times. Well, how do you get to be a political appointee? It's because you have the same value system as someone else. But you have to separate what that value system is to understand that, you know, everyone under you that you're sworn to protect are your constituents. Doesn't matter who they are, what color, what creed, it doesn't matter. I mean, everyone has a value. And I think that's where now it's become politicized that there's one side versus the other. And the America I know is split between one side versus the other. And I think that's the hard thing to watch right now. And yeah, do I think things are getting politicized and agencies are doing things out of those reasons? Absolutely. And I think if you talk to the officers on the ground, those street level guys, they're tired of it. When you put a political appointee just because of who they are or what they are into positions where they're leading hundreds of men and women that are, you know, they face death on a daily basis now. Those type of people shouldn't be there. You should be there for the love of your community, for the love and values that you hold dear, and the people that you're leading. And the citizens come before all others. And that's not happening anymore. It's a political agenda that's driving everything that they do.
I think that's called the rule of law, isn't it?
Yes,
right?
it is.
We
Yes.
apply the law even-handedly to all people regardless, right?
Absolutely.
And Satan is called the lawless one in Scripture.
Yes.
I know this is kind of off from the track we're on right now, Richard, but before we went on air, I've read that Communist Manifesto, but when you were reading that, and it was just kind of a refresh that, my goodness, it looks like this country has gone down. Can you recall any of those? I'm putting you on the spot.
Oh, no.
Can you recall some of those? Because we have to understand, like when I have interviewed Kamal Salim, former jihadist, came to America to wage cultural jihad, you know, I'd done several times where we covered the fact there's people that hate America and want to see this country destroyed. And we're seeing this Marxism, this communism, literally set to destroy. Did you
I've got
find
it
those?
here.
This was kind of...
So these were the goals of the Communist Party of America that were read into the congressional record in 1963 by Congressman Albert S. Herlong, a Democrat out of Florida, and it just reads like headlines almost today, right? These things were 50, 60 years ago was what they wanted to do, and now it looks like how many of these have they already accomplished? Number one, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States.
Check.
Get control of the schools and teachers associations and soften the curriculum. Gain control of all student newspapers, infiltrate the press, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and pictures, eliminate all laws and governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and other deviancy as normal, natural, and healthy, eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that of separation of church and state, and on it goes. I mean, there's 45 of these here. But
Richard, when you're reading that, actually, this is what you just read is what happens when a nation forgets God.
Yeah.
We're irrefutably a Christian nation. That does not mean everybody's going to be a Christian. It means our foundations are irrefutably Christian. If there was no Bible, there would be no America. And when you're reading that, it just kind of shocked me tonight before we went on. And to hear those, here we are. So have we got any questions coming in tonight?
We certainly
I'd like
do.
to hear what the people are thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. Let's see here. Okay. Well, we've talked about this already, but Jeff on chat wants to know, how do you feel about the weaponization of the law enforcement, such as the FBI, with county election clerks or the RCMP in Ottawa against peaceful trucker protests? Do you have any perspective on that you'd like to add?
I don't. The RCMP, historically, they've been a very good organization. I went up there and taught in Ottawa a few years ago against marijuana, and they were very concerned with that. On the politicalization for the FBI, you know, I dealt with a lot of good FBI also. I don't know that case to a very good degree. I just don't. I wasn't following it. We're dealing with a lot of our own issues. I deal with the FBI almost weekly, probably, on major incidences, and they assist us in a lot of things, but I've not had them come and commandeer or try to take over anything or to push anything in the county.
So you've had some FBI agents that have been great to work with.
Yeah, I mean, they've helped us with multiple cases, from major homicides like the Barrett homicide, multiple types of gang-related type thing, cartel-driven issues, and they're actually one of the reasons we were able to get through a lot of the cartel issues in the county. So there's good side too, and I think I preface it with, you're going to find organizations that have a lot of good direction and a lot of good people, but if it's driven out of Washington, D.C. on different things, I kind of sometimes wonder if they're putting something together, there may be an issue there. But unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about that case to be able to tell you one way or the other.
Right, right.
And I think, Richard, that's important too, that we don't put all of them in the same, because the Tina Peters thing, you know, from law enforcement, we heard these kind of raids, and both current and former FBI agents commented on what happened to Tina Peters and Sharona Bishop and all that. They said, unbelievable, beyond the pale. You only use that on the most dangerous criminals and situations. So I think it's good we understand there are good FBI agents out there and men that love this country and their communities, but we also have things driven from Washington, D.C. there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, one of the things I was going to ask you earlier, Jason, was the liberals and the Democrats, they act like they want to help the poor and they want to help the minorities, and maybe they do in their heart, but these policies, it seems like they end up hurting the very people that they're supposed to help, like releasing prisoners from jail and all this sort of stuff. What communities and neighborhoods are the most impacted by that?
Well, those communities. Because here's the thing, a lot of those folks are arrested out of those communities. Those communities, and they give you this narrative that, hey, if we take from these communities, they're not going to want to trust you when you come in and talk to them. Well, that's kind of baloney, right? And here's why it's baloney. The only time they're not going to trust us if we release those inmates right back, or those criminals right back amongst them, to where now they have to fear that they're going to be released every time, so they can't say anything. They don't have the freedom to say anything anymore, because you have gangs like you do in Somalia and different places where you have warlords now set up in communities. It's no different. So they have more of a fear of those type of people being released back into their neighborhoods, because what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? Who are they going to go to? Because if you go to law enforcement, well, they're going to know who turned them in. And if we're just going to write them a summons or release them back onto the community, what happens to them? We can't stop what happens next. That preying on people. You know, you just don't let a tiger into a lamb pen and go, hey, it'll be okay.
You know, I remember when all that went down in Seattle, when they took over they were talking about having community patrols or something like that, you know, citizen groups that were going to handle all the criminals. How'd that work out for them?
Yeah, it didn't work out at all. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of crazy. Well, here's another question. This is from Donna on Facebook. Wants to know, are there any coalitions in Texas that people can become involved in? I think she's probably meaning to help law enforcement and that sort of thing. Are you aware of anything like that? Is there any nationwide group or? You
know, here's the thing. There's not any real large nationwide groups. There's not any real statewide groups. Here, what I would tell you, right? So start in your own church area and start developing those. Do it at a local level. Grassroots works, right? If my local leaders are getting enough pressure for what's happening in my area, that's going to have the fastest response. And then those local leaders that you elect, they need to go back to the legislator and they need to bring that fight to them. You have 64 counties in the state that are now starting to bring that fight of, hey, we don't like something that you're doing. I think there's protection in numbers, and we have to band together. And if you create those groups in your local areas, then you can band them together and work towards that end.
Yeah.
Jason, I was going to ask, so we've got 64 counties in Colorado. Are you connected with other sheriffs in other counties and being able to share these concerns and synergize in any way?
Yeah, we do. And I actually get a list of different legislative acts that are going to go out. We have a very strong association. We've actually joined the sheriff's associations with the police associations. We have a district attorneys association. We're all going at it the same way. The problem is you have a state legislature right now that doesn't care what any of us say. We can all get up there and testify as to a bill and what this will do to us and how it's not good, and basically it's wiped away. So all your professionals that understand what these things are doing are being told we're wrong. You're the problem. And that, to me, is a serious problem.
Well, that goes right back to the people have to vote. Right. We've got to change who's in those seats up there, because you guys are going in there with these concerns. You have the pulse on your communities, and we've seen that. They don't care what you say or what you think, and they disregard it. So it's time for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, here we've got a question about the Second Amendment. So how does the Second Amendment support law enforcement, actually?
Well, I'm one of those sheriffs that think everybody should carry.
Okay.
I think it would be the best thing in life. Here's the thing. There's a lot more respect if somebody knows that I'm armed. You don't see as much crime in this county, but we're also one of the highest density populations with firearms in the state. You don't see it as much because people have to be a little bit nervous about that. Look, when you have areas like Chicago or New York that have some of these really strong gun laws, and you have some of the highest crime rates and shootings in the nation, you got to wonder why.
Yeah.
And the narrative is, oh, well, that's only because they have guns. Well, no, listen, I got more guns here than they might have. But the thing is I don't have that type of behavior going on. So I support the Second Amendment. I think a lot of sheriffs do. And the thing is the more the merrier. So please come get your concealed weapons from my county. We'll give it to you.
I think I recall that saying. It said, remember, when seconds count, law enforcement is only minutes away.
Absolutely.
And so the point of that is you are the true first responder. And all you need to do, I don't know if y'all had heard the 911 call. Just hear one of these calls, and it was a mother and her two daughters, like 9 and 10 years old. And she got her husband on the phone. Now, she had a gun in the house, and she called her husband and said, there's someone trying to break in the house. So she went into a crawl space, and he kept her husband on the phone, and he had someone, I think, in the office calling 911. They were on their way. And her husband was saying, now, if he comes to you, shoot him, shoot him. He wasn't looking to just rob the home. He went and found them in a crawl space, and she emptied the gun on him, and he somehow survived it, got in his car and drove away, and then crashed his car or something like that. But if she hadn't been armed, there'd be a dead woman and 2 daughters, most likely. And so the Second Amendment, one other thing, if I can tell this, in Miami, they had these carjackings that just went ballistic. So they started pulling, when these carjackers, they'd look for rental cars. They'd say, tourist. And so they started issuing concealed weapons permits, and that just began to surge. And the carjackings miraculously went down so these people that are pushing for gun control, people ask me, do you believe in gun control? I say, absolutely. You should keep your grouping within a size of your fist on your target. That's the gun control I believe in, and it'd be a lot safer society.
Well, here's the thing. If my family is home and somebody's going to come after them, I can't get there fast enough. Law enforcement is not that instant security, right? You have to be that instant security for your family. And I think every American should be able to defend their homes. Now, we make a lot of laws, and there's a lot of castle doctrines. There's a lot of make-my-day laws. There's a lot of things that different groups want to take away from you as your rights. But your right to bear arms, and that gives you the leverage to stop those actions, then do it. I think that more sheriffs are now starting to say, we want you to be armed, we want you to be proficient, and we want you to be able to protect your families.
Amen.
Well, so what's the difference between a sheriff and police? Can you just educate our viewers on that?
Yeah,
how is your role different than the police department?
Well, in Colorado, it's a little bit different too. But in Colorado, a sheriff is the top law enforcement official of any county, right? And police chiefs have more a municipal code, and they work at will to the city management and or the board. A sheriff is an elected official, right? My authorities are much broader. My whole authority derives from I'm to keep the peace. And that's a pretty broad spectrum of what does that mean. So we derive our authority from that, from the people. And that's different than a police department that derives its authority from city charters and boards, and then that's the direction, right? A sheriff has the ultimate authority of law enforcement within your own county. And we are probably the closest elected position to its constituents.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so what about schools, Jason? Like, do you see a relationship between crime and problems in the community and how well our local schools are operating?
Well, I think so. I think all of it plays a part.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: if our schools are indoctrinating with issues that have a "I hate law enforcement," or they're putting up a BLM flag, and I'll be honest, I think the BLM is a criminal organization. If we're indoctrinating people with those things, and we're separating the belief of what this country means and who all those stakeholders are and what that community is, I think we have serious problems. We start to see things. We used to call it the broken window, right? We drive through a neighborhood, and the first house we come to has a broken window, and somebody sees that, then we start having more broken windows, and we start seeing more crime and higher. It works in schools, it works in communities, it works in just all groups of people, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it.
So like the teaching that that America is systemically racist, I can just, now I didn't have that when I was a kid in school, but I can imagine if I'm taught that, that's going to make me look at my officials with a jaded view and not trust you.
Absolutely.
Are you seeing any effects of that now, or
we don't in
too
this
early?
Community.
Yeah.
That's a good. I have a great community in this county, and honestly, everyone gets along. It's a very niche community. The thing is, I remember when I grew up in school, I didn't even know what racism was. It wasn't even talked about. It wasn't an issue. Everybody worked together. It didn't matter color. It didn't matter. And nothing mattered. We were just kids. And not until the last few years as it really rose to the surface. And that's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way. I think we're at a worse issue with race in our communities now than we've ever been. And I think truly that's a matter of organizations that want that to be an issue. They're pushing that to be an issue. They're trying to destroy how the communities had started to come together.
Absolutely. I think so much of it is generated by our media and by special interest groups and things like that. And unfortunately, the church, not the institutional church, the body of Christ has become salt with no savor. We've lost our pungency, and we've ceased to be light. And the only thing left when you don't have light is darkness. It's really simple in its basic understanding, but I think the big thing is we've got to start speaking up. We've got to have believers stand up. And it is happening. It's just taken this unfortunate lawlessness to begin to start to abound and things like that. And that's the history of our country. It was the history of Israel in the Old Testament. Israel would get in trouble, cry out to God, and God would deliver them. Then they get lazy again, and then they forget what he said, and they stray away. Then they cry unto him. And so here's where we are in America again. So any more questions, Richard? I'm curious about what the people...
Yeah, here's one on the red flag gun law. This person asks, how do red flag gun laws affect law enforcement and its relationship with the community? And I'm going to tag on to that and say, have you seen any red flag law cases here in your county, and what do you think of it?
No, and I don't.
Can you define what the red flag law is for everybody?
So that red flag law, what it's talking about is now anybody can go to a court and basically get a court order to have weapons removed from somebody, and law enforcement now has to go out and do that. We have not seen it in this county. You saw a few cases across the state that really kind of went south, I think, on the way it was done. Really, I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right for a judge or a law enforcement official to make the belief that someone's crazy. Because it can be done by an ex-girlfriend can come in years later and say, hey, now there's a piece of proof, right? They have to bring in. There has to be a body of what that proof looks like. But it's outside of law enforcement too. And I just don't think it's a good idea. I think now it's pitting us against good Americans too, saying, hey, we have a reason to come take your weapons. Well, yeah. I don't have to have probable cause. I just have to have a suspicion. And I think that has really harm the relationship with our communities.
And it's not suspicion that you've committed a crime, suspicion that you might commit a crime.
Yeah, how do we look at something and say, well, you might do this? Unfortunately, this law really, what if somebody says, I might go commit a crime tomorrow, so you're going to take my weapons too? I think there's a lot of that. It's good for some and not good for others. And that's a problem with the judicial system.
Well, we've got time for a couple more questions. This one's a little bit off the train of talk or whatever we're talking about here, but just so he can get his question answered. He says, how do you find someone who just scammed you and all you have is a phone number? What advice do you have for people who are victims of identity theft? And
identity theft is one of the larger ones in Colorado, and that's a recidivism issue also. Those people don't go to jail. Right? They're getting released right away, and all they're doing is affecting more and more and more people. Based off of a phone number, it's pretty hard. They're spoofing phone numbers. They're using your phone number to call somebody. This is a lot of this is becoming an issue, and it's almost impossible to deal with. We receive these phone calls every day, and unfortunately for identity theft, there's really nothing you can do anymore because a lot of these are from overseas.
Well, what do you do? What advice do you have for people to prevent it in the first place instead of after it happens coming to you?
Hey, don't fall into this. If you're not calling them, don't accept the information. Don't give them the information. Because we see a lot of that where someone will call and say, hey, I'm with the sheriff's. And this happens all the time. I had one just the other day that says, hey, I'm Sheriff Jason Mikesell. You have a warrant for your arrest. I need you to go ahead and give me your credit card over the phone and your information. And what do? They give them that information. If I, as a sheriff, will never call you to ask you to turn yourself in and give me a credit card over the phone. Don't give a credit card over the phone or your personal information ever.
Wow.
One more question.
One more
real quick. What advice, when it comes to law enforcement and the right attitude on law and crime and that sort of stuff, how should people decide who to vote for? How do they know? How do they figure that out?
Ask them questions. They have candidate forums all the time. Find out what their stance is on law enforcement. Find out what their stance is and what their voting record has been towards law enforcement and those issues. Go to your local police departments, your local sheriff's departments, and ask. They'll tell you. They'll tell you what they think, even though they're not supposed to. There is a time when you can say, you know what, I'm supporting this person.
Wow. Jason, thank you so much. We're out of time for tonight. I want to thank you for just serving our community.
Yes.
We are so blessed in this country, Richard, and I just don't think we express our thanks enough to people like you and law enforcement. And I just want to say to everyone that's watching tonight, thank you for joining us. And be sure to check out Truth and Liberty, our website, because a lot of information, but I've just been stirred tonight, Richard and Jason, to be more aware of what's going on. And I am going to do that as a pastor and get our Culture Impact team to find out about these groups. I know that a lot of you are watching from other states. Start asking, start inquiring around you, and get some of the people around you to start supporting law enforcement. Find out what you can do to bring awareness to the community, and most of all, realize your vote and voice counts. You can make a difference. And we also want to thank CTN for airing this. It's always a blessing that they carry this. And thank you for joining us. And if you're not a partner with Truth and Liberty, remember we're a 501c4. You don't get a tax deduction, but the Lord takes note, and we appreciate you. And get these books. We're almost out of Alex McFarland's book, and so get your copy. And we hope to see you next week. Appreciate you being faithful to watch Truth and Liberty. We'll look forward to seeing you next week at this same time. And until then, may the Lord bless you richly.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net.